Yo YouTube, hello and welcome to episode 6 of Draw for 20. I am your host, Eyes of the Fox, and today I drew Jubilee from the X-Men, and I based it on the 90s Jubilee, a little bit from the cartoon, a little bit from the comic. Like, I think I used the colors from the comic, and I'll kind of get into that when I get into the colors. You can see I start like super small. I had a sheet of like this girl in like different poses, and I kind of found that I was just kind of looking for one that I kind of liked, and so I just started kind of small because it's as I stated in the previous episode, it's easier to start small and then get a little bit bigger. So you see here, I just make it bigger, and then it looks really jank. And you're like, what is that? Is she holding a coffee mug? Like, is it even a she? Like, what's going on here? So then I fade that out, and I come back in with my red line, and since I already have like the pose kind of where I want it, I just had some pictures for like reference for the costume, and just started drawing it. I wanted it to kind of feel like the first impression I had when I saw the character for the first time, which was in the animated series. And I believe in that series, the first time we really see her, she's like going to the mall, and she like goes to the arcade at the mall, which used to be a thing the kids did. There'd always be like arcades in the malls. And I remember that's kind of when she discovered her powers. She got tilted at some game she was playing, and her little fireworks kind of blew it up, and the guy was like, "Get out of here, you mutant!" And then the Sentinels broke in, and all hell breaks loose. The X-Men show up, and we're on a ride for 6 years in the cartoon. I didn't really know a lot about Jubilee. I still really don't. I remember her being like an Asian American character, which is really cool because Jim Lee drew her, so she kind of actually looks like Jim Lee, like in the comics. Like, if you look at the comics and you look at a picture of Jim Lee and then you look at a picture of Jubilee's face, it's like, that's Jim Lee. So I don't know, hopefully I didn't sound like too racist there, but I really do feel like he kind of put a little bit of himself in that character, also being Asian American. But I did some research for her powers, because I never really knew what they were. Everybody just kind of explained them as like fireworks. And so I found out that it's actually like plasma that she can control with her mind and then ignite to create like little mini explosions. So she's basically like creating these like plasma like these little tiny like plasma explosions all over the place, like whenever she uses her powers, which I thought was pretty cool. And going back to the arcade thing, I put a Game Boy in her hand, because it would have been the 90s, and that would have been around the time of the original Game Boy. And so I was like, okay, so how do I like capture the character? And it's like, oh, just have her chewing some bubble gum and playing video games as a kid would do, you know. So yeah, that's kind of where we got there. I don't remember a lot about her in the comics. Like, she was just always kind of there. I don't think I ever read any of the comics where like they fleshed her out or like made her a big deal. I know that in the Wolverine series, like, she was hanging out with him for a little bit. So most of what I do remember about Jubilee is from the X-Men cartoon, and I remember the whole dynamic between like her and Wolverine, which is why I kind of like chose those two as the first two that I did, is because I felt in the very first X-Men movie we got, which is actually still pretty good, I was a little disappointed because they kind of turned Rogue into what the Jubilee character was for Wolverine, which was kind of a daughter figure that also felt ostracized, and just from like her family fucking hated her. They were like, can you not be a mutant? And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. And so she kind of like ran away and left everything behind her and just kind of wanted like this new life. And Wolverine kind of saw a little bit of that, a little bit of himself in her from what I remember. But then again was like, hey kid, like, you can create little fireworks. That's not so bad. Look what happened to me. You know, like Wolverine was that worst case scenario for like every X-Man. Like anytime another X-Man had like a complaint about some bullshit, Wolverine was like, okay, when they do experiments on you for 10 years, when you've lived through like 3 wars and, you know, 200 years of garbage and experimentation, and, you know, your mutant ability can like barely keep up with the poison that they've put inside of you, then you can talk to me. So I think Wolverine always had a way of making the other mutants feel a little bit better about themselves. You can see here when I get into the black line, I did test some ink weight or some line weights and realized that I was a little bit thicker on my line weight here than I was Wolverine, so it doesn't, like when I get to the end, it doesn't quite feel like it's part of the same drawing. I think that's just, I don't know, I think that's just a little bit of my personal style coming through. I tend to be like really heavy-handed, and so even if I have like a really thin line, it's going to end up being heavy because that's just how I draw. And I don't know, it just kind of stuck with me. When like it's really a product of the digitalness of it all, because when you are drawing in real life, you're, you know, most of the time you're drawing with like a fixed millimeter, so it's a lot harder to get those thicker lines unless you are using a wider tip. But I guess I just kind of like with the digital, it just kind of always tends to naturally get a little bit heavy. But yeah, like I said, I just try to kind of keep it in line with the design of the early Jubilee. I know a little bit later they gave her like this like one-piece like spandex suit that had, it was when they kind of like made all the characters into like the blue-yellow, which they still do have the blue-yellow, but they gave them all kind of like the unitards, and it was just like a product of the 90s design, I guess. But yeah, I don't remember much about Jubilee outside of that. She had like powers that nobody really understood, and like I don't even think she really understood it. And so I just try to kind of represent those little plasma blips as like off to the side there with the little stars and triangles and circles. You know, maybe she's like getting really into her game and her powers are just kind of popping off in the background. Still wanted it to have the same kind of like feel to it, so when we get in the colors, they remain the flat. I missed some of the white highlights, so I'll get into that later. But yeah, I'm just trying to think. It's like I never had any of the like female action figures. Like my mom for some reason wouldn't buy me the action figures of the female characters, even though some of the female characters had like some of the best representation in comics at that time. I think like you had Storm, who's a strong black woman. You have Jubilee, who's like an Asian American. Like I felt like X-Men really did feel like when I was in school and you look around the classroom and there's like all these different kids of like all these different nationalities and cultures and backgrounds. And the X-Men was like, that's all cool. You're all different, but you're all the same, and you're all unique, but you're all part of this ecosystem, right? And I feel like parents try their hardest to preach the exact opposite of that sometimes. Like, you get these parents that are like, no, they're not the same as you, like, you're better. Like, yeah, it's just, I don't know, for whatever reason, parents have their I guess parents that were products of like the 60s, 70s, 80s that weren't hippie stoners tend to run a little bit on the conservative side. And the X-Men kind of taught me against that, right? So this is why I butted heads with my mom a lot, is because like I was learning all these values from these comic books and cartoons I was reading that completely contradicted these values and things that she had in her mind, right? Like, I think one of her reasonings for not getting me the female characters is sometimes she just didn't like the way they were dressed, even though she would drag me clothes shopping with her and make me stand in the middle of the women's underwear section for like an hour just looking at half-naked women on all the underwear labels and graphics, so I thought that was kind of weird. And then I think she was afraid that I would like molest them or something. Like, I really don't know like what the fuck she was thinking, because none of those things like crossed my mind. In my head I was like, Storm can shoot lightning and make wind, and like Jubilee is just Wolverine's friend. How could I have like Wolverine doing stuff if he can't have his friend like coming around? It's the things that parents put in the kids' heads. A lot of times those things aren't even there until they put them there. It's like there was a movie, it's like This Is the End, and it's got that guy, that one like Canadian dude that I forget the actor's name, but he was like, when Hermione, I can't remember her name either, when the girl that played Hermione in Harry Potter like shows up in that film, and he's like, well, we're all men and she's the only girl, like, and they're like, what are you trying to say, man? What are you saying? He's like, well, what, we gotta repopulate the earth. Like, I know that's what we're all thinking. And Seth Rogen's like, no one was thinking those thoughts until you thought those thoughts. And so it's just interesting the kinds of things that like parents will expose their kids to unknowingly, by trying to not expose them to those things. But it would have been cool. It would have been cool to have like those action figures. The designs are pretty dope. And it's just just little things like that just like rubbed me the wrong way as a kid. It's like, didn't have April O'Neil with the Ninja Turtles, so it's like, okay, well, you just have all the dudes. I think that's why today, like, if you look at my shelf, it's like all my pop vinyls and most of my other figures, it's all just female characters, because I was never allowed to have any of them as a kid. So it's just like, all my pop vinyls are what, like, I have 2 different Batgirls. I have Catwoman. I have Kira from the Dark Crystal, Rey Skywalker, Miss Peregrine, Jinx from League of Legends, Miss Fortune from League of Legends. I'm an art kid, so I have Audrey Hepburn up there, Ramona Flowers, Chun-Li, like, Princess Allura from Voltron, Sailor Jupiter's around there somewhere. But yeah, just Spider-Gwen stuff, Princess Peach, Pez Dispenser, Powerpuff Girls. There's all these strong like female characters in media and entertainment, and like, I guess my mom thought, like, I don't know what I really don't. I don't know to this day, like, why why she hated it so much. There's even I had the Maximum Carnage comic, and it had like, it was the trade paperback, and there was just one page in the whole freaking comic that had like Mary Jane for some reason was like in a bathrobe, and like Spider-Man's going out the window, and she's like in this like you know, because she's kind of shocked because he like leaves very, very quickly, and her bathrobe is like open and she's in her underwear, and it's just one page in like a 250 something page book, and she's in, I think I'm in like 5th grade or about to be in 6th grade or something, and I'm sitting there reading my book. She just like, it's not even on that page, she just snatches it out of my hand and starts flipping through it to be like, I don't know if I want you to read this. I'm going to look in it and see what's inside of it. And she just happens to flip to that page, and she's like, you can't have this. This is not suitable for you. And I'm like, you make me stand in the underwear section. Like, how is that any different than this? And like, whatever you think I'm using this book for, that's not what it is, you know? And so like, I dealt with that growing up, just like this parent that thought they were super liberal, but they were like actually like hyper conservative, and just feeding all these ideas into your head that, like I said, didn't exist before. As we get back to the Jubilee drawing, I am using the same colors from Wolverine, because that's kind of what they did in the comics, to not necessarily save on ink, because you are still using a lot of ink, but you know, it's very cyan, yellow, like those are the colors in the printer, so there's not a lot of mixing that has to go on, so those colors come out like very bold and bright, I think, at that time. And if you didn't have to mix the colors, then I think they lasted a little bit longer, because it wasn't printing blue where that yellow was, you know, it was just the yellow or just the cyan. Here I do go into the white highlights. I do forget the white on her legs. I noticed at the end, which I may go back in on the next one, which I think is going to be Gambit, just because I always thought he looked cool. Never really knew much about Gambit outside of the show either. It's funny, I'm drawing like all these characters that I remember from the cartoon that either never really like took off in their own right, or just have like stories that are so separated from the main team of X-Men that nobody really knows about it. Like, there's a whole history of a Gambit that I learned about that we'll get into. But with Jubilee, couldn't really find anything. It was just like, she'd be in like even if you search like Jubilee art or like Jubilee X-Men, you do like a Google search, it's like 4 pictures come up, and it's like the same 4 pictures at like different resolutions. It's like you would think in your head as a, you know, as a fan, that and you're looking for Jubilee books, you would think that there's only like 2 books out there, because there's only like a handful of images, but I'm sure she popped up in other places. But yeah, I just wanted to get the feel that she was a kid, just wanted to play some video games, had her raincoat, trench coat, rain jacket, or whatever it was, you know. I still don't know to this day like what it was supposed to be. Now here I'm playing with size, right? Like, because Wolverine's kind of like supposed to be this like shorter, like stockier dude, and so I started playing with like how big I made her, but her line thickness is so that she's gonna look larger than like if I made her lines thinner, then it would have actually made her look smaller, but because they're thicker, it kind of makes her like pop a little bit more into the foreground, because that's, you know, the closer things are to you, the darker, the heavier they are, and the further away, the more faded and faint they look. But yeah, I think we're running toward the end here. I have about 9 seconds, so that's going to do it for episode 6 of Draw for 20. I will see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.